the President of Guinea has resorted to other actions, all of which are tantamount to a state of war. Sékou Touré, not satisfied with making Kwame Nkrumah co-president of the Republic of Guinea, has permitted him to use the National Broadcasting Service of Guinea to make treasonable broadcasts to Ghana in contravention of the basic accepted principles of international relations, namely the respect for sovereignty and non-interference in the internal affairs of other sovereign states. These series of provocative actions by Guinea constitute a flagrant violation of the norms governing international relations.
The date is 29th October 1966. The Foreign Minister of Guinea, Louis Lansana Biavogi, is leading a delegation of 4 officials to an Organization of African Union meeting in Addis Ababa. Together with the 4 officials are 15 Guinean students who are headed to Nigeria for a cultural exchange program. So the 19-person delegation leaves the Guinean capital of Conakry aboard a Pan American Airways flight. As this was the only flight headed to Addis Ababa, the plane was scheduled to make several stops at other airports along the West African coast to pick up other passengers. Eventually, the plane lands in Ghana at the Accra International Airport, and this is where the drama begins to unfold. Ghana at this time was being ruled by traitors in the army who had illegally taken power in the absence of the rightful president, Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah had moved to settle in Guinea with 81 Ghanaians, many of whom were with him on the trip to Vietnam, during which the illegal coup occurred. Not only was Nkrumah living in Guinea, but he had also been made co-president by Sékou Touré, the president of Guinea, and his government. The army traitors had announced to the world that the Ghanaians living with Nkrumah in Guinea were being held against their will. Listen to Ibrahim, the man who was Ghana's ambassador to the US at the time, repeat this allegation to American journalists.
There are over 100 Ghanaians who are now being held by the Guinean authorities against their will and being prevented from returning home to rejoin their families. The latest information is that they are being coerced to engage in subversive activities to fulfill Nkrumah's eventual aim of toppling the new government of Ghana by force of arms.
So with this background in mind, let us return to the flight that has the Guinean delegation on board arriving in Ghana. Immediately, the army traitors realized that there are Guineans on board, including their foreign minister. They jump onto the plane and force them off the plane. The Guinean diplomats and students are manhandled and put under arrest. By this act, the army traitors in Ghana were telling Sékou Touré and the Guinean government that they have captured their people and will only release them if the Ghanaians who were with Nkrumah were allowed to return to Ghana. So as you can imagine, all hell breaks loose after this happens, and it leads to what some describe as the first US diplomatic hostage situation. Sékou Touré's immediate reaction is to effectively place the American ambassador to Guinea at the time and all Americans in Guinea under house arrest until his people in Ghana are freed by the traitors. In addition, he closed down the offices of Pan American Airways in Guinea. At this point, I am sure you are wondering why the Guinean president will hold the US responsible for the actions of those ruling Ghana. Well, there was the fact that the Guinean delegation was traveling on a Pan American Airways flight, and there was also strong suspicion that the US was involved in some way in the events that had occurred in Ghana. But more relevant was the fact that the new regime in Ghana had proven themselves to be heavily pro-Western and pro-American from day one, and this was not lost on Sékou Touré. In fact, in a now declassified US government memo from Robert Kwame, the president's acting special assistant for national security affairs to President Lyndon Johnson, the military regime in Ghana were described as being almost pathetically pro-Western. So in order for Sékou Touré to force them into releasing his people, he needed leverage, and the Americans in Guinea were the most effective leverage he had, because the US government clearly wielded great influence over the regime in Ghana. Meanwhile, at the OAU meeting that the Guinean diplomats were originally headed to, the Ghanaian delegation are given a hostile reception, and eventually a 3-month special mission is sent by the OAU to Guinea to interview the Ghanaians who were with Kwame Nkrumah. The special mission was made up of the Vice President of Kenya, Joseph Murumbi, the Foreign Minister of the Congo, Justin Bomboko, and Sierra Leone's Minister of Information, John Nelson Williams. It must be noted that the OAU mission arrived in Conakry on the 3rd of November, that is 5 days after the Guinean Foreign Minister and 18 other Guinean nationals had been detained in Ghana. In all that time, all the Americans in Guinea, including their ambassador, remained under house arrest on the orders of Sékou Touré. This will remain the case as long as the traitors in Ghana kept the 19 Guineans captive. The OAU mission was greeted at the airport in Conakry, Guinea, by the Ghanaians whom the traitors in Ghana alleged were being held captive by Kwame Nkrumah and Sékou Touré. They were in a boisterous mood, with many of them carrying placards expressing their loyalty to Nkrumah. Each and every one of the 81 Ghanaians were interviewed separately and privately. They were also informed that they were free to board the airplane that was waiting at the Conakry airport and be escorted back to Ghana by the OAU mission. All 81 members of Nkrumah's entourage, without exception, refused the offer to leave Guinea and return to Ghana. Each of them personally signed a statement making clear that they had chosen to be in Guinea with Kwame Nkrumah out of their own free will. The shameless lies of the traitors ruling Ghana had been exposed to the world. All the Ghanaians living with Nkrumah in Guinea had moved there to be with him willingly, and the claim that they were being coerced were outright lies. To completely extinguish any doubts about their choice to stay in Guinea, the Ghanaians in Nkrumah's entourage went further to hold a meeting to pass a resolution and also issue an open letter to the traitors in Ghana. I hereby quote some portions of that open letter to the NLC traitors. We have been rather embarrassed and certainly extremely annoyed to learn that your clique has arrested and detained 4 Guinean diplomats, including the foreign minister, and 15 Guinean students who were in transit at Accra International Airport on October 29, 1966. We understand you to have declared then that your action was because we, the Ghanaian entourage of Osagyefo here in Conakry, were being detained here against our will. In view of this allegation, we are forced to communicate very reluctantly with you. We have been interested to note your apparent concern for our welfare, inherent in your declaration, but we are far from deceived by it. We observe that since your neo-colonialist rebellion of February 24 this year, your relentless witch hunt for progressive Ghanaians has shocked freedom lovers everywhere. However, it suffices us to add only that your clique has even published and circulated material on all of us in Conakry with Osagyefo the president, in which we are described as wanted persons. That is why we find your apparent concern for us not only surprising, but also totally contradictory. Indeed, the deliberate dishonesty and duplicity inherent in this concern is completely belied by the sadistic inhumanity your clique has always ladled out with such enthusiasm. This is why we do not hesitate to reiterate our conviction that your clique is a notorious liars' council. Since you declare that your scandalous arrest and detention of the 19 Guinean nationals, including the diplomats, was because of our forceful detention here in Guinea, we have passed a resolution denying our alleged detention. We contend that your allegation is a deliberate lie, concocted by you for the purpose of your own scandalous actions. Further, we undertake here, quite apart from sending you a copy of our resolution, to tell you what you should have known long ago. We are here in Guinea not under any suppression, promise, duress or threat. Each one of us is here by voluntary choice, springing from a conviction of the justness of our cause. Far from being under any form of detention, all of us here are quite happy and totally free. Please make no mistake here. If without us you cannot run the country whose administration you have temporarily stolen by force of arms, then it is just too bad. Because as long as you have anything to do with the administration of the country, we are not coming back to Ghana, unless it means your elimination. We will never be willingly prepared to serve under or have anything to do with your clique of usurpers from the parade grounds, who are not only systematically selling our country, but are also enthusiastically destroying the achievements others have done so much to make possible. Unlike you and others, we are not prepared to betray our country and people. We are not prepared to become traitors. We are not cowards. We understand and appreciate the cause which we are following, and we have the courage of our convictions. For the cause of socialist Ghana and for the greater African revolution, we shall always be prepared to go any lengths. This is why we are prepared to follow wherever Osagyefo President Kwame Nkrumah leads. This is why we are in Conakry, in the Republic of Guinea. Such is our stand. With this, the OAU mission left Guinea to report that there was no truth in the allegations made by the regime in Ghana. The regime in Ghana had been exposed for telling barefaced lies and had no option than to release the Guineans they had detained, which they did. The Guinean delegation led by their foreign minister returned to Conakry to a hero's welcome. It is only after this that Sékou Touré released the American ambassador and other Americans from house arrest. Following this extraordinary sequence of events, the American ambassador to Guinea was called back to Washington to assess the situation. He was questioned on whether or not the US should break off diplomatic relations with Guinea and cancel aid programs. But before the US government could make any such move, Sékou Touré acted first by expelling all members of the US Peace Corps and many of the US Embassy personnel. He also cancelled the main US aid program in Guinea. Over 2 decades later, Robinson McIlvaine, the US ambassador to Guinea at the time, recounted the events that took place in an interview. "We were the first diplomatic hostages. That was before Tehran. The entire American community, everybody in the embassy, all the Peace Corps, we had several hundred Peace Corps volunteers, were all put under house arrest, and there was a big brouhaha about that." So that is the incredible story about how a feud between Guinea and the traitors ruling Ghana got out of hand and affected American diplomats and citizens living in Guinea. It is also important to note that the Guinean students who were detained reported being beaten and tortured by the Ghanaian traitors, and also alleged that the police had failed to return their valuables that were seized when they were arrested. As I conclude, I need to ask, do you think that Sékou Touré was justified in using the Americans in Guinea as leverage to pressure the regime in Ghana to release its people? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section, and please do make it a point to support our work in any way possible so we can keep this going. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it to others. It goes a long way. Asante sana.